What's up, y'all? Shuffle, and today's video is a review of Mahokenshi, which is a deck builder focused on not only using cards, but also the terrain around you with a samurai mage aesthetic. In this video, I will tell you of my experience with Mahokenshi after I have completed it, and I will try to limit it down to 3 points that I think are good and 3 points that are bad, and if you should buy the game or not. Starting off, what is good about Mahokenshi? For one, the aesthetic is very awesome and pleasing to look at. I really liked the Cloud Island theme, and I loved the idea of samurai mages. They all looked really cool, and their abilities were cool and flashy. And overall, everything was really nice to look at and fun to interact with. The second thing I greatly enjoyed was that all 4 of the characters had clearly defined archetypes for each of them. These are based off precious stones. The 4 of them are House of Ruby, Topaz, Sapphire, and Jade, respectively. Of these 4, you begin play with House of Ruby, whose unique mechanic is flying. Several of their cards give them the fly status, which allows them to travel over tiles that are normally difficult terrain, such as forests and mountains, without incurring any additional movement costs. Also, once in their flight state, House of Ruby is able to use stronger versions of their cards. I believe the character's name is Ayaka, so if I get this incorrect, I apologize. But they are certainly the most straightforward character to play, so it makes sense that they're the first one. The second character you receive is from House of Sapphire. This is Kaito, and Kaito is a defensive focused character, so many of their cards focus on giving them additional defense to block damage, and then a mechanic known as spikes. Spikes are a mechanic that if an enemy hits you, you reflect damage back to them equal to your spike value. So if you have 10 spikes and an enemy hits you for even 1 damage, you're going to bounce back 10. The other mechanic that Kaito has is Provoke, but this never felt useful or relevant during my time playing. Next is Sota from House of Jade, and House of Jade plays as a more assassin-style samurai. Many of their cards generate extra attacks that cause 0 energy, so something like Shivs if you played Slay the Spire with Silent. They also have quite a bit of land mobility. They can inflict poison upon their enemies, and then their final mechanic is Stealth. Actually, I take that back. Their final mechanic is the ability to create decoys. Of these abilities, Stealth and the decoys never felt very relevant, and I don't know if that's just because of the AI, but they really never seem to interact with them unless you just put them in choke points or something. Stealth ultimately played out as just a trigger for any other card that requires stealth. The final character is Misaki from House Topaz. She plays much different from the first 3, where she's not focused on melee combat. She has half the HP, or at least half the starting HP that the other 3 have, and many of her cards are based on range damage. Her movement abilities are also among the best because she can just straight up teleport, which means that all those maps that have gaps in between, like oceans or literal open air, she can jump through them with these. Many of her cards are destroyed once you play them once. Some of them have conditions where they can be brought back, but for most intents and purposes, they are one uses. And her last mechanic revolves around creating wards. Out of these, the wards felt the least relevant. As I said, all the characters are different enough that they're fun to play, and my only complaint about how you unlock them is that you get Misaki so late in the game, she's like past the halfway point, that you don't actually get much time with her. My final point for the good section of the game is that it's fun. Wow, go figure, games are actually fun. I really did like the game, and the things that I did enjoy were the hex grid combat, because unlike other deck builders, I feel the hex grid gives you some other element of strategy to focus on, so movement cards are relevant and good, and leveraging terrain can make harder fights easier, and mismanaging terrain puts you in a more vulnerable position. I haven't played too many games with hex grid systems, so it was a very nice change of pace. The game also has a straightforward but fun meta progression system in the form of talent tree that you spend your currency from completing challenges on, as well as gear that you can unlock while leveling specific houses, but you can then use that gear on the other characters. Now it's time to talk about the bad stuff in Mahokenshi. The first point of what I did not like in the game was that it was very short. It is in dire need of some content. It's a good experience considering how short it is, but the fact is it is very short, including the time I've spent recording background footage, as well as trying to fight some of the harder fights again to develop strategies to make guide videos on. I still completed almost everything in the game within 15 hours. I was desperately hoping that once I got to the end of the game, I would unlock something akin to a roguelite mode, roguelike mode, whatever, some kind of endless mode, anything to keep playing the game and enjoying the characters. And sadly, it was not there. My second point for what I did not like about Mahokenshi was sort of related to the first one about the lack of content, but really what gets noticeable as you get further into the game is the lack of music and the lack of enemy variety. You see most of the enemies that you're going to fight for the rest of the game relatively soon until later on when there's a specific modifier they begin to have, so that was actually kind of welcome to see. But really it feels like you're fighting the same enemies every single mission, and it stops being enjoyable after a point. And then the lack of music was a bit odd because I didn't notice it at first, but then once you're fighting bosses or you're in, the last mission of the game and everything is the same like 3 soundtracks that you've been hearing the whole time, it's quite the letdown if I can be honest, because the few songs they have in the game are good and it's just, why isn't there more of it? My final thing that I did not enjoy about Mahokenshi were the boss battles. There are not many of them, and I'm not going to spoil them in this video. Long story short, I did not enjoy them. They largely felt unbalanced, and they were made a bit unfair on purpose, so you're incentivized to pick whatever character you think has the best chance of winning, and not so much leverage the normal things in the game, like the terrain and your card upgrades and stuff, in order to beat them. You're more encouraged to try and figure out what breaks your class and then use that to beat the fights. For some, that might not even be a distinction, where trying to do the best and most optimal thing to win is what you should be doing. And I'm not going to argue with the people that feel that way, but I personally didn't enjoy that because it felt a bit limiting on what I was allowed to do in order to win. Overall, I did enjoy the game, so I'm thankful I was able to play it. It's one I've had my eye on for about a year now, so it was fun. If there was any extra content, maybe free add-ons or a cheap DLC for like $5, I would consider returning. And yet the thing that always sticks out to me is really just how short it was. The lack of content was such a letdown, if I can be honest. When I compare it to something like Inscription, even though they are much different games, they're both card games, Inscription was about the same length. I remember finishing it in around 15 to 18 hours, and that game did a much better job of changing the pace, keeping you engaged, and keeping the player interested to find out what was happening. Mahokenshi is a game that feels like it kind of starts running out of steam after the halfway point. As I said at the top of the video, I was fortunate enough to get the game for free as a review copy. And if I was to say, should you buy the game or not with your hard-earned money, I think it depends what it actually costs, because I am unable to see what it costs at the moment because it's only a wishlist option on Steam. But just as a subjective answer, I don't think I would pay more than $20 for this game. If it was more than $15, I would only recommend it if you are a big fan of this type of game, if you don't really care about the negatives that I outlined, and you want to have a fun way to spend a weekend. If it goes on sale for $10 or $8 or even $5 sometime in the way distant future, then definitely it is worth grabbing at that point. That's going to be it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. If you bought it, what you thought of it, if you're thinking about buying it, and if my review had any sway on your opinion. And if you do end up getting the game and you're having some trouble with the boss battles that I mentioned, I will have videos posted on how to deal with them, and I'll link them under this video. As I said before, my name is Shuffle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.